All right, hello and welcome to the Coaches Corner, brought to you by the Endurance Lab, where you can join the coaches live here as we recap the week and answer your questions from the forum. My name is Jason Flores, one of your Endurance Lab coaches, and I'm joined by coaches Taya Friedstead, Ian Murray, Mitch Dingerman, and our nutritional therapist, Andrea Cullen. Just a reminder, we are live on several different platforms this morning, so this also gives you a chance to be part of the show by asking questions. So jump on live and be part of the show. We'll get this shared out as we get some introductions from our coaches, but today we've got a really interesting topic. I'm going to ask if Taya can introduce it, and let me get this shared out, and we'll do our early roundtable here.
Awesome. So we're going to be covering all things training camp today. Not only the camp itself, but how to prepare for a training camp, the types of training camps out there, things to keep in mind in terms of not only your training, but also nutrition during the camp and after the camp. And so this time of the year, we're here in February, a lot of people are going out and doing those initial early in the year miles or kilometers to get ready for their season. And so it's very common to have training camps this time of the year. So we thought it would be a good topic to bring in.
Yeah, absolutely. So out of the group, people have done different types of training camps, I imagine, just to different lengths and stuff like that. I think the longest I've done is 5 days, but most of the time locally we'll do 3 days. It's either about 2.5 days of riding back to back. How about everybody else? What's your experience with camps and stuff?
So I've done.
I've done. Oh, go ahead, Tay.
Yeah, you typically 5 to 7 days, and if it's a 7-day, then there's some, at least one rest day there in the middle. Yep.
Ian, you were saying?
I've done about a week-long training camp on the bike, and then I've taken like basically a week-long vacation where I've done my own stay home training camp.
Yeah.
Which is actually, that's actually a thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Across my radar for this year, whether they be past endurance lab riders have asked, would there be a way to do like an indoor short 3-day type thing? And I've been kind of teasing with it. Like, could you rack up 500 or 700? It would be pretty painful over 3 days indoors, because people are in places where they can't ride outside, or should people just be waiting for that sort of thing? I don't know. I've been kind of teasing with it and kind of talking to people about it, seeing if it would be worth putting together or just waiting to put off.
Yeah, and I think taking a step back, thinking about what the main purpose is for a training camp, right? So typically for amateur riders is to have that high volume / intensity week to get a jump in fitness.
Right.
So you get that big stimulus back-to-back days, and then as a result, you have a jump. And if you think in terms of CTL, which is your chronic training load, and you want to increase that, that's a way of doing it.
Right.
And it's sort of like an accelerator, if you will. And doing it indoors on a trainer, I think is possible, but I still think you have to sort of spread it out a little more.
I do. I think so. I mean, on a short-term basis, to get to that goal of jumping in fitness, it's all a numbers game, right? For those that are crunching those numbers for CTL, to get that number up. But that last bit, let's say 4 weeks before you do the fine tune, this is I feel like something that you would use, and we'll talk about the different types here next, that you would use very close, much more closer to your event versus further out. Maybe we could touch on the different types that either we've had experience with or that we feel kind of parse out in the far as go ahead.
So I think the one that most people are used to is the early season or preseason training camp, and those actually have two different functions. One is to get that fitness that you're probably lacking from starting in preseason training camp in the season. But two, the other side is when you're going to be racing with a team, like no kidding, team racing where you're using team tactics. This is the time where you start feeling out who's good at what, who's got certain roles. This is the time for team leadership, whether they're on the road captains or whether they're the director sportif type folks, to actually assert themselves in that position or assume that position. If you're a team that has a sprint train, this is the time you work on that.
Right.
It's the time when you practice different team whether it's just groups to 2 or 3, but those team things, so you can start learning about each other. So that's the other part of it. So I know with ODZ's team camp coming up, most of the riders aren't going to be racing together.
Did you hear that, everybody? This is a camp that we're building miles and getting to know each other. And I think that you're right. That is important.
Yeah, but even though you won't be racing physically together, most of the team won't be, but we'll be still practicing some of the same techniques, but more importantly, the same communication.
Yeah.
And that's really the key part for a lot of these early season camps. The second type of camp is an event-specific camp. And what I mean by that is you'll see this all the time with, Tour de France teams. They're like, oh, or guys who are going to race the Giro or whatnot. We're doing a training camp at altitude.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's because they're going to go up and train at altitude for one, a fitness bump, but two, they're generally climbing. So they're specifically targeting certain training effect to get better at climbing, to get better at the steep climbs, to deal with the weather, to learn how their body reacts. So those are very specific things. We also see that in triathlon quite a bit, where people go to Kona and do a training camp of a week or 2 weeks to get used to the island, to get used to the heat. They'll do it in the Canary Islands and a couple other places as well.
They don't usually do that like the 4 weeks before Kona, right? That's not training camp. 4 weeks before.
No.
Okay.
No.
Yeah.
Well, it depends who you are, but so actually 4 or 5 weeks before Kona, you will have quite a few people go and do basically a week-long training camp where they crush themselves for a week.
Right. Recover back.
And then the rest of it is recovery and acclimation to the island.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and it's really the event-focused one is perfect for you to train everything. So like Ian said, your skills, but also your nutrition and how you're going to feel. If you can match the climate that you're going to be in, is it hot or is it gravel, for example? I think a lot of gravel races are gaining a lot of traction. So popular right now. And so you can spend time on and doing that, even with your equipment, if you're even testing your equipment at the same time. And so, and I think one last one that I wanted to mention, which Ian touched on, the skill-focused one, team building and race scenarios. There are also some camps that are strictly focused on more of the technical learning, and it's more developmental. So now you're working on how do you attack? How do you cover an attack? How do you go up a climb? How do you work as a team? How do you do, a crit scenario? Now you do a road race scenario. Now you do a different scenario. So there's some of those are very, very focused, and they're not as common as the base miles ones, which are the ones that people get the volume and which is, in fact, it's pretty effective. I mean, there are some things to watch out for, and we'll get into that as we go on here.
Yeah, and then there's one other kind that we haven't hit on. It's the tourism training camp.
Right.
What it is, and they're not technically a training camp. It's cyclotourism or multi-sport tourism vacation, and those are actually great too. And you can get some pretty decent fitness out of those. So understand. So if you're a family who likes to cycle together, those are great things to do. And like I said, it's not necessarily a training camp per se, but it is the same concept. But you need to be prepped, just like anything else. You need to be prepared for it when you go.
I mean, if you look at some of the ones like from Cycling House and things like that, I mean, they've got week-long like tourism cycling things, and you're putting in a lot of miles.
Yeah.
And you're having a lot of fun.
Cycling tours. Yeah. And all you have to do is show up. They even give you the bikes, right? I think some of these they get the bikes. They take care of your luggage, and you stay in luxury resorts, and it's really a big vacation / riding event.
It's pretty much like the Team ODZ training camp.
Yeah, that's right. Team ODZ.
I guess that'd be a good way to. It's like a lot of food, and it's just riding throughout the day. But I think it's important to have these goals, and so maybe we could talk a little bit as people do prepare for these different types of training camps. What are things that should come up on people's radars that they should be preparing as the weeks come? Maybe let's say 4 weeks out, going up to like the week before out. What are things that we should be letting these riders know?
I mean, I'm a big kind of a list guy and planning things out, and I think you've got to really think about things that are 4 weeks out that are going to take time. Like if you're not comfortable servicing your own bike, getting your bike in to get serviced, right? I mean, you've got things that are going to take a long lead time. You need to be looking at what you're going to need for the trip and what you're going to have to buy that might take some lead time.
Maybe some knowing where the construction zones are.
Yeah, it's important.
I thought that was more of a week of, but
We go, yeah. So I think, so equipment check is important. Getting your bike serviced, like Mitch said, if you're not able to do it yourself, making sure it gets checked out.
And how you're going to get it there? I mean,
right? Yeah, I mean,
some things, whether you're going to fly with your bike or you're going to ship it, there's different lead times, and what are you going to put your bike in? I mean, you've got to really plan out all these things so you're not doing it at the last minute because you just can't.
Yeah.
Week of is getting all your equipment laid out, making sure that you know what the weather's going to be, where you're going, and what kits you're going to need. You may need a wild assortment of gear from warm to cold, depending on if you're climbing altitude and it's going to be cold. One of the things I found that was actually really interesting was saddle comfort. If you're someone who's not used to riding many kilometers or miles, you may want to give a thought to, if you got a little niggle in your saddle that's bothering you, what that's going to be like after, a few hundred kilometers.
Yeah. Well, there's the other part too and I'm surprised Andrea hasn't jumped in and beaten us to death yet. As we're talking about everything is, when you're 4 weeks out from these camps, you got to start looking how you're eating going into the camp and what you're planning on eating there. And if you have any dietary restrictions or limitations or peculiarities, you got to start figuring that out for camp itself, because if you're going on one of these, it's different if you're going to your own team camp versus if you're going to one that's sponsored by somebody else that you have zero control over the food.
Yeah.
You got to start making that plan and figuring out, hey, how am I going to cope? How am I going to do? I mean, if you're like, if I got stuck going to a vegan training camp, I'd be like, I'd be having to try to find out where on my bike, my rides, can I stop and get a burger?
Yeah.
I was thinking about a lot, but everyone's contributing, so I'm being quiet. I think your health running up to the camp is really important. You can't just go and squish a load of stress things in because you're guilty because you're going away for a week. If you arrive at camp exhausted, you're going to get sick and run down by the time you get home between travel and everything. It's a really good time, maybe 4 weeks before camp, to get your bloods done, especially if you're going to altitude or to a harsher climate, different environment, to check your iron, your B12, your general health, your white cell count, just to make sure that your body is primed to respond to the camp that you're investing all the money and the time in. But definitely, if you're going to altitude, you need to make sure your iron and hematocrit and ferritin and B12 are optimal.
Just make sure you stay healthy. Just to, generally healthy on the way to camp. You're not doing things that will risk you getting sick,
go to work with a mask, in the office.
Being close to your kids. Just stay away from a month. Yeah.
No hugging.
1 month, no contact. No, that's important. And the other side of it too is if you're going to be gone for a week of pure cycling, you got to start conditioning the family that your contact is going to be limited that week. Okay, there's a couple different things. One, if you're doing a camp that's built on design, it's designed to build a team camaraderie.
Yeah.
When you're not training, the focus is to learn about your teammates, spend time with your teammates, because you don't get to do that often.
Yeah.
So you kind of have to condition the family that, hey, I'll call you guys at this time every night. I'll try and give you a call and we'll talk for 25 minutes, 30 minutes. And then that's it. You have to kind of set expectations, because I've seen too many people where they go and, they get there and then they call, and the first night's 30 minutes and the second night they're in trouble because they only talked for 30 minutes the night before, and then it's a 3-hour conversation, and then they're pissy on the ride because there's home stress involved in it. So
I think it's the equivalent of a work trip, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So
it's a work trip that doesn't suck.
Exactly.
One other thing on the prep is checking your insurance policies. One, your health, but then two, also your equipment. Though I mean,
you're right. You're right. I remember.
Yeah. I mean, there are bike insurance policies, and depending on how much you've spent or invested in your bike, you may want to check them, and some of them actually cover transit as well. So depending on how you're shipping your bike, they may also provide coverage for it in shipping, which is important because like FedEx can charge quite a lot to cover cover equipment like that.
Is in the terms of insurance, you might even check with your credit card, because you would be surprised at your credit card company. Oh, you already have some insurance through them, so
Good.
and that covers some things. I wanted to mention the in terms of still in the topic of preparation, right? The weeks leading up to camp in terms of training.
Yeah.
So what should you be doing? If you know you have that camp coming up, which you will ahead of time, hopefully months ahead, you're going to slowly start building up a little bit of volume. So we're not saying being on the bike for 6 hours, which would be the equivalent of the ride that you'll be doing at camp,
Right.
but at least starting to spend a little more time so you get ready. So let's say that you're coming off of sort of an off season, meaning not off season off the bike, but decreased volume and intensity. You start to pick up a little bit, not like you're going to do it in season and be ready for a race, but at least so you're ready for that camp. And the way to do that for time crunch cyclists and athletes, you have your weekday work, your week workouts, and then weekends is when you start to increase your volume and time on the bike, leading up to it. But then the week before camp should be a rest week in terms of doing less volume and less intensity. So you kind of do that build, not the same as a race again, but you do that build more in volume up to a week before, and then the week immediately before you take that down a little and be ready for it.
Yeah, I think a lot of thought has to be put into, preparing yourself, whether it be traveling with your bike or traveling yourself. There was some comments on the live stream about is it a good thing to have to drive 1,700 miles before getting to camp and that sort of thing. So all of these can work against you.
It's a great thing.
It's a great thing. These are all things that can work against you when you get there. But obviously, we have to get to these camps as we can. But preparing these things like, checking equipment, making sure you understand the weather, making sure you're comfortable on the bike, and that you have expectations set, whether it be at home, so that you can reach your goals there, are really important. Maybe we could shift gears a little bit here to go to during the camp and things that we should remind riders that they should remember during the camp. Things like goals, or what do we want people to think about during that part of it?
It's not a race.
It's not a race. Yes, I like that.
So
that. Every
some
day
of the
is
rides
not a
are
race.
hard.
Yes.
Some rides are hard. Some rides are not. So one of the training camps I did, it was more of a cycling camp, but we had a couple triathletes there, and when we get done with our ride, we'd go for a run, and the run was easy, like stupid easy.
Yeah.
Super conversational. That's the kind of thing it was, but it wasn't a 20-miler. It was 5 to 8, but that was part of the problem we had in the camp itself. We had a few youngins who didn't quite understand that we had a recovery day world champion, and he'd get to the front and try and win all the recovery rides, but which would then tend to push the pace. So we had to kind of just let him go, almost treat him like a Z-Power person in the coffee ride. But it's one of those things that you got to understand. What is the goal for every ride? Every ride, there should be a ride leader, and the ride leader should be telling you, or the coach or the team director, telling you, this is what we're doing today. And those who don't do it need to be publicly shamed by the rest of the riders, and forced to do the dishes that evening.
Yeah, it's tough, and I think it's important to set expectations and set goals verbally to people. This is what we're going out for. These are your leaders. These are people that you're going to be looking for to set your pace, because not every ride goes out at 10 watts per kilogram for the first minute, and then it settles at some point until everybody falls off the ride and nobody comes back to the house. So, setting daily goals is super important, and understanding that the pace, understanding before you go out what pace you're going to keep with the group that you're with, or separating groups, whatever it may be.
Right. And if you go with the coaches, and it's one of those very structured, let's say, training camps, you don't have some of these problems, right? Because it's already kind of laid out for you.
Yeah.
But still within that group that you're put in, you could go bananas, and you could just decide that you're going to pull all day. Yeah. But then that's not really the goal, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah. And then, so what about things like making sure you take the skills that you've worked on, let's say indoors for the weeks and months before, putting yourself maybe something in your mind, maybe it's not in the camp, but making that you want to focus on a technique. Let's say we have riders going to camp that maybe haven't ridden outside for months, or maybe haven't done really big group rides, more than like 3 or 4 people. you want to put in your head, like, I want to learn to, follow a wheel, be able to move around the group comfortably, and execute these things where, be able to catch the group if I was falling back in a safe manner. Put these things in your mind so that you're able to kind of understand, like, okay, I want to work on this, or the next day I want to work on this more. I'm not that comfortable. Don't be comfortable 4 arm lengths away and 4 bike lengths away, like, and keeping this cushion zone, because it's not something that, you want to put yourself in a place where you're adding to the group and that you're learning new skills. So put those in mind so that every day you're kind of looking at those.
And at the same time that you're learning those new skills, if you are with a group and you see that the pace is super high for you, or you see that you're falling back, the immediate thought, I think, is that rider is going to think, I suck, or I'm slow, or I should be riding harder. I should be catching up. My fitness isn't that great. Well, that might not be the case, right? It might be that you are just not with the right group, or there's somebody in your group who decides to just do whatever they want, and whoever is behind has to deal with it. Right?
Wagner.
So,
everybody's waking up.
The thing to keep in mind is, well, you did that on day 1 or day 2, didn't work out.
Yeah.
Look for another group.
Yeah, and I think that's important, to ride within yourself. A lot of us spend a lot of time looking at numbers. Our group, or our close connection group, tends to be a lot of indoor riders, so it's important to look at these numbers because we know them. You know what numbers that you could ride. If your FTP, let's say for round numbers, is 200, you're not going to ride around at 300 all day. It just doesn't magically happen. So just ride within yourself, and find the group that works for you. I think that's important. Setting goals and understand that every race, every day isn't a race.
Yeah, and on that too, when you're talking the skills, so when you're doing things, especially descending, because descending for some reason is where people lose their damn minds.
Yeah, it's so weird. It is so odd.
You've got to understand. So what I just told someone who's going to a cycling training camp, some of the skills they need to work on. I said, descending is one of those skills. Try to push your limits a little bit, but always ride within yourself. Mm-hmm. So some people are going to feel uncomfortable once they hit a certain speed because they look at the number and they translate that to fear. Whereas it should be, am I able to safely maneuver and handle the bike around the corners, around the turns? What kind of turns do I have coming up? Are they 180s? Are they, big, awesome sweepers where I don't even need to actually do anything but slight lean? So always when you're going to test your skills, try to understand where your limits are and try and push that just upper limit just a little bit, but never try to make those big jumps of I'm going to go from 0 to hero in one ride. So it's always, if you feel comfortable, push it a little bit more. If you start feeling uncomfortable, but you're in control, that's okay.
Yeah.
But if you feel like you're not in control, then you need to back it off.
Yeah, I recently heard it was a talk of going downhill. There is some space, but everyone needs to ride within themselves. But on the uphills, especially in groups, the faster riders actually need to ride less hard so the group stays together. Mm-hmm. Because when the group stays together, the group moves together. Because let's say a whole group's spread out by minutes, then someone's at the top waiting, and then there's always like that last person who gets up and they're like, all right, let's go. And the person who just got up at the top, you're like, they're probably dying. And so if a group were to stay together, move together more quickly, and even though it doesn't feel like it may be drafting, you'd be very surprised of just the motivation of getting people up and over. You'll move more kind of fluidly through the day, right?
Right. So what I used to do when I had to road march all the time was I would go up and down the formation, back and forth, because I could do it a lot. I was stronger. So I could do it easier. Same when you're riding your bike. If you're doing a long, sustained climb, go to the front, do a turn, come out to the back, encourage people coming up, and then kind of work your way back up through the field and drift back to the back. And, so you're going to get a lot more work doing that. Trust me.
Yeah. And I think it could be very motivating. So I think that's something to add. So something to think about. So with this, are there any traps, people need to be aware of, or rider types you need to kind of watch out for, or that sort of thing? What kind of things are riders should be looking at during a camp?
One of the things we already talked about, which is doing too much too early and hitting it, and you're going to feel fresh because let's say that, like we said, you're prepared for it. You increased your intensity and volume over the weeks before, and then you tapered for the camp, and now you're feeling fresh and ready to go. Not to mention you're all excited. Not to mention you might want to show off to your friends, and so you go out and you do too hard too early.
Yeah.
If you want a good example of that, look at the Giro d'Italia from last year, where Adam Yates was attacking the hell out of the race in the first week and the second week, and then the third week he went, and lost the Giro, which he had minutes, and he lost it in like the last 3 days because he'd overdone it in the first week. So same thing for this, even though it's a 1 week training camp usually. Again, like Jason said and Taya had said, ride within yourself, understand your limitations, and there's no reason for you to try and set the KOM up Mount Lemmon on day one if you have, if you got 600 miles of riding still left in the week.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of riders, I mean, we do have Endurance Lab athletes headed to our camp, but to any camp, speak with your coach, spend some time with them, establish some goals, some zones, things that you can look for. Say, hey, what am I looking at if, I get separated, or if, there's a climb and people are kind of like, lined out, what am I going to go for? Am I just going to try to chase people? Am I try to, go to your zones? Your coaches have put you in specific zones to work on, SST, you've worked on VO2 max. These are things that we have put into your plans that allow you to understand your fitness. Yeah. And this is the time to be able to use those and not just blow them out of the water and just end up crashing. Go ahead.
I think what I'm hearing you guys say though is really ride within yourself a lot though too.
Yes.
Right. Yes. Good example. I think the last day of camp last year we had that what was that one road? It was like the 2% grade for 10 miles or something like that.
Yeah. Pat will remember. He's on board right now. Yeah.
And I was hurting, right? But at a certain point, you may be by yourself, but you're riding within yourself, right? You know what your capabilities are. You've been training. You've been working towards this. You just do it, and you get through it, and then you don't realize that people are waiting for you, and you just keep going, and then they get worried that you're gone, and
it works
well,
out.
What's important with that, Mitch, is it's not just riding within yourself. You can push yourself, but don't dig a deep hole, especially early on. If you're going to bury yourself and go deep, that needs to be in the last day. Well, actually, it should be the second last day.
I think that's for someone who hasn't done a camp though before. I think that's actually really interesting, is because if you haven't done long, kind of intense rides back to back to back, it's hard to really know how to pace yourself in that first day. So really, you need to really think about those first couple of days and what it's going to feel like after day 3 and day 4 and day 5.
That's the most important part of camp as far as being prepped and ready for it, and that's where Andrea comes in.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Well, I was thinking you could title it energy management. You need to manage your energy appropriately with, training camp for a lot of us is meant to be a little bit harder. We are going to be a little bit fatigued at the end of it. That's the super compensation cycle. You are sometimes going to feel a bit rough, and then you have a bit of recovery, and then you bounce back even stronger. But you need to be aware of your fueling requirements for these sessions. You need to keep an eye on the zones that you're in. You need to bring your own fuel and not be that really annoying person that steals other people's food. Because most people will have bought with them what they need. Also, within the group, there's going to be people that are, hoping for a little bit of weight loss, and then you have these high metabolism machines who have higher food requirements. So you need to know who you are within that. You might be the one who needs to get an extra snack in somewhere and, find that during the day. Because it will affect you if you don't. If you're with a load of people that seem to be able to keep going on fresh air and you kind of go along with that, you're not going to recover or have the fuel that you need. If you're someone who gets overwhelmed being around a lot of people all of the time, you need to try and get a bit of quiet time. So you're managing that's an energy too, even though it's a different type of energy, so that you have the mental energy for your training sessions. So yeah, I think it's I suppose within any camp. I've never done one. I've done my own off by the seaside on my own, where I've had good roads and good sea, but I've not been in this group situation. I've watched a lot of my athletes do it.
Yeah.
And I think energy management and knowing your body and listening to your body, but also pushing your body a little bit is really important, and not being the one who comes home sick, run down, injured. You know, there might be days when, you know, you might just say something's niggling. Instead of pushing through or doing it on pain relief, you may need to call it short a little bit, have a chat to the coach or the leader who's there, because getting a worse injury on camp, coming back just because you wanted to prove yourself in camp, isn't part of the long-term plan.
Camp isn't fun.
Yeah, getting injured is not fun. Yeah,
but also taking Advil as recovery every day is also not a good idea, because that's an anti-inflammatory. It's just not what you're after. You know, that's going to impair your adaptation.
I think that brings out the second, an important part of the second part of the day, right? You know, you're spending a lot of the day, you know, we talked about fueling before, riding most of the day, but also recovery. So the rest of the day, Ian hinted at it, is should be getting to know your other riders and recovering, right? Legs up. You're talking about, you know, Airlax boots. You're talking about, you know, foam rolling, massage, things like this, to make sure that you're ready for the next day, that your body is loose, able to recover and to recoup. This is what we want. You want, you know, you manage your energy during the day, you recover at night, and get lots of sleep. I think I saw one of those on the last one.
Sleep and as much as, I mean, we're talking about fellowship and really getting to know people, which is, I think, is an important part, right? I mean, you're not there just to work yourself and be miserable. So there's always probably going to be some, you know, beer, wine, alcohol. Keep it to a minimum. I don't think it's, I mean, I enjoy it.
No more than 2 bottles a person.
Right. Thank you, Ian. Right. And that's the whiskey, right?
Yeah. Oh man. Only on the last day. Oh my God.
But that's the whole thing about the camp. That's the purpose of going away, not just to be in a place where you have good roads or the type of roads you want to ride or the gravel or etc., but also to remove yourself from the daily stresses, right? And your only job that week is to work on your fitness and recover for the next day. And that's really important in terms of not only, like Andrea said, the mental part, also the fueling part in terms of what you're eating. And I think we could give maybe a couple of quick rules of thumb for people to, you know, eat on a bike perhaps every 30 minutes to 45 minutes, right? And what to eat on a bike. And then after, as soon as you get back, it's so tempting to just kind of lay down and, you know, do whatever. Try to eat as soon as possible as well after your big ride.
I think the big, like, I'll start with this real quick, Ian, is just to have a plan, guys. We've talked about this all the time. Have a plan. How are you going to eat? Have the food you're going to eat. And hopefully your ride leaders have thought of, like, if you're going for 4 or 5 hours, that you've got to stop in there between, but make a plan so that you have fuel coming in. Go ahead, Ian.
So the other part too is, most training camps have hard day, easy day, hard day, easy day, hard day, something like that.
Yep.
On those easy days, or it could be, you know, you have recovery ride built in, so it's maybe 2 rides in a day, and neither one of them are super hard. One's a skills based and one's a recovery. Even on those short rides, you got to eat, because it's, as Andrea said, it's a week long energy management. Right. It's not daily energy management, which is most of what we do when we're at home. It's daily energy management. But when you're in a training camp and you're having a lot more intensity, or at least a lot more duration and time in the saddle, it's about week-long energy management. So you have to eat, even on the rides where you think, I don't need to eat. It's only 2 hours today.
Yeah.
For sure.
I mean, if you want to bonk and be flat, that's cool. But what's going to happen is you're going to feel great on your easy ride, and then about an hour and a half into the next day's hard ride or long ride, you're going to feel like you have rocks in your saddlebag.
Yeah, you don't want rocks in your saddlebag.
No.
Yeah, you don't really want to be the person showing off that you can do a 2-hour fasted ride, and you may be able to, but the purpose of this training week isn't. It's not that really slow. You want to be fueled to have strong sessions and not be putting extra stress on your adrenal glands doing things, you know, with too little fuel. It's not the right scenario for that, even if you can do it.
And Andrea, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the way it works is, so your body is in that mode. Once you still day 1, your body is probably thinking, yeah, this is another ride, training, whatever. Day 2 is sort of like, okay, this is a second very long ride. Day 3, right, your body gets into that state of being able to respond to all of those demands. With that, I think you have the adrenaline, you have the cortisol, you have everything just getting you into it. After you're done with your camp, your body, maybe day 1, you're still in that state of, okay, are we going to go fast? Are we going to go riding? But then day 2, no, there's no more riding. And then the body starts to realize, oh, I guess now I can relax and I can recover and repair. And what can happen then is hunger strikes a big time. So you see that, after, let's say 5-6 days of very intense training, after that, your body is in recovery mode and you feel hungry. And then you might say to yourself, I don't want to eat because I'm not training as hard, so I shouldn't be eating that much. But you have to focus on recovery, right? You have to focus on perhaps under protein, nutritionally dense foods,
cookies
for your recovery.
They're all really interesting points. If some people aren't very body aware, you could be in what's called sympathetic dominance,
Right.
hyperarousal for that whole week, which is going to impact your recovery, actually. And I think this is where a little bit of mindfulness, a little bit of stretching, a little bit of slow down, rather than a really hard session followed by a massage that pummels the daylights out of you, because that's going to create even more stress in the body. And actually, we know that that's not actually very good for your muscles. So, gentle stretching, lying on the floor, having relaxed time with your friends, being calm and quiet, I think is going to help you get more out of your training sessions when you go into that sympathetic state. So you've the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight, flight, race, go, go, go. And then you have the parasympathetic, which is the rest, digest, recover, repair. So you want to try and optimize that every day, while also using nutrition to support that. So I feel always, when you can, use real food, even on the bike, unless you're specifically telling yourself, today I'm going to do a race day practice. It's a perfect session. Speak it through with your coach. They may say, yeah, that's the session. Get out the gels, try and hit your 60 plus grams of carbs per hour. Use the products so we know how you feel on it. But the rest of the time, you do want to be using the more natural approach. Otherwise, you're just giving your body junk food for the whole trip. A little bit more protein, especially immediately after sessions, and a little bit in maybe your breakfast. So oats and an egg, or oats on some whole grain or rye, things like that. You're probably going to need a little bit more carbohydrate. Especially if you're at altitude, you are going to burn through calories at altitude because you're sort of in a higher zone all of the time. So don't be afraid to fuel your body well with real food. And if you're fueling well in the sessions as well, when you finish, you're not going to be starving and going straight to the cake shop. Although maybe one day when you all go to the cake shop, that's a good idea, because it's, or the ice cream shop. I know we've ice cream fans on the lab. That's good too. That's being human. It makes it fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think so for that, making sure we were talking about traps and we went on to like after recovery, but making sure that you have the fuel, looking at your intensities, and then watching out for recovery on those each day in between. But then how about if we talk about like recovery afterwards? Andrea talked about like how there's this rebound effect from each day. What about after the camp? What are we looking for riders to kind of keep an eye on? A lot of times you'll hear like riders get sick after camps because of the huge response, and Andrea's talked about that, this hyper arousal response. What are things that we can do to kind of help afterwards? The question.
Well, I jump in there? If I had someone going to camp and they're looking at having a good year, there's a really important A race ahead, and this camp is important to you, I would think about making sure you're supporting your immune system and your adrenal system with some herbs and possibly probiotics if you're traveling. The amount of athletes I've seen go on warm weather camp, it could just be Portugal or somewhere you'd never expect it, and get a food poisoning bug just because their gut is sort of under stress with all of the training, and then the food might not be the same, and then there's a bit of emotional stress, and wham bam, you end up with a parasite or a bug because you're not able to clear it. So probiotics can be really helpful, but also probiotics have been able to mitigate the effects of hard training as well and support your immune system. So buy one that's heat stable and take it before you go and travel with it. And then herbs like Eleutherococcus, rhodiola, astragalus, echinacea, they're going to provide you with a bit of support. And also some of them have ergogenic benefits where they help support you get more out of your training. Others can help with altitude. So if you know a herbally friend, get some good quality herbs, and they're just going to help you get more out of your session without getting sick or run down with that rebound. It's because the training stress is affecting your cortisol. Cortisol then will affect your immune system. You come back, you have a great training week, and the next week you have flu, which then scuppers it all.
Yeah, definitely challenging. So immune
Actually,
care. Good.
one thing that could be handy is to see if anyone can loan you a PEMF device, or there's quite a few
A PEMF
electric
device.
pulse machines
Okay.
to travel with, and then support recovery where everyone can use them. And some companies will loan it or let you, borrow or trial if it's team, which is going to be useful for everyone on camp to help recovery. Something worth looking at.
Yeah, and are you talking about a muscle stimulating machine, or what is a PEMF?
It's a pulsed electromagnetic wave frequency therapy. So it's providing energy frequencies that are very helpful for the mitochondria, for repair, for muscle repair, for recovery. So you just basically lie in it and have a chat when you're there.
yeah, that's what I was thinking it was. Okay. Interesting. Okay, let's see, what else we've got there? So we talked about after and immune care. Oh, Ian, did you have something? It's a little wave.
I gotta run.
So the other thing, so we talked about still in the topic of nutrition during camp, etc. This could also be a time for you to test something. So if you have events coming up and you want to test different way of fueling, you could do that, because if something goes wrong, it's not like you're losing a race, right? So maybe you have one day that maybe that bar wasn't good, for me for the whole time. Or maybe rice cakes wasn't a good idea because for some reason my gut doesn't like rice. It could be one of those things that you try. Of course, you're not going to try something different every single day, because then
you wouldn't know
what's
what
the
worked.
point? Yes. So yes, it's good to be prepared. It's good to support your body, but you could do a little bit of trial there too, is my point.
Okay. So just bringing it all together here, obviously making sure that you understand kind of the type of training camp that you're going on, understanding the goals, making sure that you're prepared for all the different things that are happening, yourself being prepared as well as your fitness, making sure that every day that you're there, you've set goals, whether you are going to work on techniques, understanding that you put those out beforehand so that you can meet those goals, being careful of some of the traps of going too hard, and making sure that you're fueling properly as well as recovering are very important. And then of course in the aftermath, making sure that you're recovering, whether it be daily or even after the week, and making sure you're taking care of your immune system are all really important, especially during these camps as you prepare yourself for these. Is there anything else that we didn't hit? I mean, I know we did a lot of nutrition. Any last things before we go here?
The travel to the camp. A lot of people fly to the camp. Some people drive a lot of miles to get to camp. Make sure you're hydrating well. These trips alone take a toll on the body, right? So make sure you're eating. The food on the plane is terrible. We had a couple episodes back that we talked about bringing your food even on the plane. You bring maybe a protein shake, your little shake bottle, some bars, fruit, etc., that you have it so you're not eating whatever they serve up there, and hydrate. So keeping that in mind, especially as you get in, and sometimes you have a ride that same day when you fly in or the next day, just making sure that you're ready for that.
Yeah, I think those are good tips. So any last tips as we go around? Mitch, what do you got? You got a last tip for training camp?
Yeah, we didn't touch on it, but real quick, check your equipment daily.
Yes.
I ended up midway through a ride last year and some screws had come loose on a cleat on my shoe, which I never would have thought. And that's not where you want to be with a cleat coming off.
We ended up sharing screws?
I think I took one from Bob, and I just needed one to hold on, and then we fixed them later. But so I mean, go through your equipment every day and just check it. Check your saddlebag, make sure don't put a rock in it.
No rocks in the saddlebag.
Yeah, I mean, all those little things every day. Do equipment check before and after.
And Andrea, you got last one for your athletes that you have going out there. What do you're going home? Last tip.
No, just enjoy.
Yes.
Oh, don't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah, that's true.
Supposed to be fun.
Yeah, and I think for me, just rides home. Just make sure you ride within yourself. You can easily get away, and your fitness will go away with it because you've trained a lot of your year in certain zones and certain fitnesses. And I think in order to enjoy yourself, you need to ride within yourself. So I think that's important. So, all right, I think we've got it. So I want to thank everybody for joining us today here in the Coach's Corner. And if it's your first time listening and would like to hear more content from the Endurance Lab, Head over to your favorite podcast app and search Endurance Lab, or head over to YouTube, search the same, and don't forget to click subscribe. For more information on when our next lab is, or more information about the Endurance Lab, head over to endurancelab.fit, where you can learn and join us to train smart and get results. We'll see everybody next week, and everybody at camp, I hope you have a great camp. Have a good day.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.